The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday evening when Daniel pulled into the grocery store parking lot. His wipers were barely keeping up with the downpour, and all he wanted was to grab milk and bread before heading home. It had been one of those days, the kind where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. 3 customers had canceled their appointments at his auto shop. His landlord had called about overdue rent, and his truck was making a noise that he really didn't have time or money to fix. He parked near the entrance and sat there for a moment, watching the rain hammer against his windshield. At 30 years old, he sometimes wondered if things would ever get easier. His dad had run the same repair shop for 20 years before passing it down to him, and back then business was steady. But now, with those big chain service centers opening up everywhere, small shops like his were struggling to survive. Daniel grabbed his jacket and was about to step out when he noticed something in his rearview mirror. An old man in a wheelchair was stuck near the curb, rain pouring down on him. The wheelchair seemed to be tilted at an odd angle, and the man was trying to push himself forward but wasn't moving. People were walking past him, hurrying to their cars with their groceries, heads down against the rain. Nobody stopped. Something in Daniel's chest tightened. He couldn't just drive away. His mom had always told him that character is what you do when nobody's watching. Even though he was tired, even though he was stressed about money, even though the rain was cold and miserable, he knew what he had to do. He jumped out of his truck and jogged over to the elderly man. Up close, he could see the problem immediately. The left wheel had come completely loose from its axle, and it was dragging at a dangerous angle. The old man's clothes were soaked through, and he looked exhausted from trying to move. "Sir, hold on. Let me help you," Daniel said, raising his voice over the sound of the rain. The old man looked up at him with tired but kind eyes. He had to be in his late 70s, maybe older. His jacket was worn and patched in places, and his wheelchair looked like it had seen better days. "I appreciate it, young man. This wheel gave out on me right when I came outside. Terrible timing with this weather," the old man said with a slight smile, despite being drenched. Daniel knelt down in a puddle, not even thinking about his jeans getting soaked, and examined the wheel. It wasn't just loose. The entire mounting bracket was bent, and the bearings looked worn out. This wasn't something he could fix right here in the parking lot with his bare hands. "Sir, I hate to tell you this, but this needs more than a quick adjustment. I've got a repair shop about 10 minutes from here. If you'd let me, I could take you there and fix this properly. Otherwise, this wheelchair isn't safe to use," Daniel explained. The old man hesitated. "Oh, I couldn't impose like that. You've already gotten yourself all wet helping me. I can call someone to pick me up in this rain? And then what? You'd still need your wheelchair fixed. Look, I'm a mechanic. This is what I do. Let me help you. Please." There was something genuine in Daniel's voice that must have convinced the old man, because he finally nodded. "All right then. I'm William, by the way. Daniel. Nice to meet you, William. Let's get you out of this rain." Getting William into the truck wasn't easy. Daniel had to carefully lift him, making sure not to hurt him, while the rain continued to pour down on both of them. Once William was settled in the passenger seat, Daniel folded the broken wheelchair and loaded it into the truck bed. By the time he climbed back into the driver's seat, they were both soaking wet and shivering. "I really do appreciate this," William said quietly as Daniel started the engine and cranked up the heat. "Don't mention it. Couldn't leave you out there," Daniel replied, pulling out of the parking lot. As they drove through the rainy streets, William looked around at the neighborhoods they passed. "You said you have a repair shop? Your own business?" "Yeah, inherited it from my dad 3 years ago. It's not much, but it's honest work," Daniel said, his voice carrying a mix of pride and worry. "That's admirable. Not many young people want to work with their hands anymore," William observed. Daniel let out a small laugh. "Sometimes I wonder if they've got the right idea. Business has been tough lately. Big chains are taking most of the customers. People want convenience and brand names, you know? They don't care about the personal touch anymore." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," William said thoughtfully. "Sometimes people just need a reminder that there are still good folks out there who care about doing things right." They pulled up to Daniel's shop, a modest single-bay garage with a small office attached. The sign above read Chen & Son Auto Repair in faded letters. Daniel's dad had painted that sign himself, and Daniel couldn't bring himself to change it even though there was no son working there anymore. It was just him now. The shop was dark and quiet. Daniel usually closed at 6, and it was well past that now. He unlocked the door and flipped on the lights, then went back to help William inside and brought in the wheelchair. "Sorry about the mess," Daniel said, though the shop was actually quite organized. "Let me get this up on the workbench where I can see what I'm dealing with." William wheeled himself in the spare office chair over to where Daniel was setting up. "Take your time. I'm in no rush now that I'm out of that rain." Daniel started examining the wheelchair more closely under the bright work lights. The more he looked, the worse it got. This wasn't just one broken part. The whole chair was falling apart. The wheels were worn down. The brakes barely worked. The frame had stress fractures and multiple bolts were missing or stripped. "William, I've got to be honest with you. This chair has seen a lot of use. There's more wrong here than just that one wheel," Daniel said, looking concerned. "Is it fixable?" William asked calmly. "Oh yeah, definitely. But it's going to take me a couple of hours to do it right. I don't want to just slap a quick fix on this and have you break down again somewhere less convenient." William nodded slowly. "I understand. What would something like this cost?" Daniel looked at the old man's worn clothes, thought about his humble demeanor, and made a decision. "Don't worry about that right now. Let me just fix it." "Young man, I can't let you work for free," William protested. "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it. Besides, what kind of person would I be if I charged someone who got stuck in the rain? Just consider it a good deed. The world needs more of those," Daniel said with a genuine smile. William studied him for a long moment and something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "You're a good man, Daniel. Your father raised you right." "I try to live up to his example," Daniel replied, feeling a lump in his throat. His dad had been gone for 5 years now, but he still missed him every single day. Daniel got to work, and William watched quietly from the office chair. Daniel worked steadily for the next 2 hours, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who had been doing this kind of work his whole life. He replaced the broken wheel mounting, installed new bearings, straightened the bent frame using his hydraulic press, tightened every bolt, adjusted the brakes, and even cleaned and lubricated all the moving parts. This wheelchair would roll like new when he was done. While he worked, William asked questions. Not the usual small talk, but thoughtful questions about the business, about Daniel's life, about his dreams and struggles. There was something about the way William listened that made Daniel open up in a way he normally wouldn't with a stranger. "The truth is, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this place running," Daniel admitted, wiping grease from his hands. "My mom got sick last year. Cancer. The insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. I'm still paying off those medical bills. And with business being slow, I'm behind on rent for the shop. My landlord's been patient, but his patience is running out. I'm sorry to hear about your mother." "How is she doing now?" William asked with genuine concern. "She's in remission, thank God. But the bills don't care that she's better. They just keep coming," Daniel said, testing the wheel rotation. "Sometimes I think about selling the shop, getting a regular job at one of those chain places. At least then I'd have a steady paycheck and benefits." "But you haven't done that," William observed. "Why not?" Daniel stopped working and looked at the faded sign on the wall, a photo of him and his dad standing in front of the shop on opening day. "Because this place meant everything to my dad. He built it from nothing. Every tool in here, every customer relationship, every lesson about doing quality work and treating people right. That's his legacy. And mine now, I guess. I can't just let it die without a fight." "That's honorable," William said quietly. "Loyalty like that is rare these days. Most people would take the easy path." "Maybe they're smarter than me," Daniel laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "Or maybe you understand something they don't. That some things are worth fighting for, even when it's hard," William replied. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, with only the sound of tools and rain pattering on the roof. Daniel found himself wondering about William's story. The old man spoke with a certain authority, like someone who had seen a lot in his life. His words carried weight. "What about you, William? You said you used to work in business?" Daniel asked while adjusting the wheelchair's footrests. "Yes, I spent quite a few years in the business world," William said with a small smile that seemed to hold secrets. "Started from very little and built something substantial. But I learned that success isn't really about money or power. It's about the kind of person you are when nobody important is watching." Daniel nodded, though he was focused on threading a difficult bolt. "My dad used to say something similar. He'd tell me that character is what you do when you think nobody will find out." "Your father was a wise man," William said approvingly. When Daniel finally finished, The wheelchair looked better than it probably had in years. He rolled it around the shop, testing every function, making sure everything was smooth and safe. Only when he was completely satisfied did he bring it over to William. "All right, let's get you back in and see how it feels," Daniel said. William transferred himself into the wheelchair and his face lit up. "Oh my, that's remarkable. It hasn't rolled this smoothly in years. You've done excellent work, young man." "That's what I'm here for," Daniel said, genuinely happy to see William's reaction. "Let me help you out to my truck. I'll give you a ride home. Actually, I should call my driver." "I don't want to take up any more of your evening," William said, pulling out an old flip phone. "Your driver?" Daniel was a bit surprised. He had assumed William lived alone, maybe in a modest apartment somewhere. "Yes, just someone who helps me get around sometimes. Old age isn't for the weak," William said with a chuckle. Within 15 minutes, a plain black sedan pulled up outside the shop. The driver, a professional-looking man in his 40s, came in to help William. "Thank you so much, Daniel," William said, shaking his hand firmly. "You've been incredibly kind. I won't forget this. Just glad I could help. You take care of yourself, William. And if that chair gives you any trouble, you know where to find me," Daniel replied. As William was leaving, he paused and turned back. "Daniel, could I get one of your business cards? I'd like to have your information." "Oh, sure," Daniel said, grabbing a somewhat worn business card from the holder on his desk. "Though I've got to warn you, we're not exactly high-tech. That phone number goes straight to the shop phone, which is usually just me." William took the card and studied it carefully, running his thumb over the embossed lettering. "Chen & Son Auto Repair. Quality work at honest prices." "I like that. Simple and truthful. That was my dad's motto. We put it on the cards 20 years ago and never changed it," Daniel explained. "Never change it. It says everything that needs to be said," William replied, carefully placing the card in his wallet. After they left, Daniel locked up the shop and sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine. His clothes were still damp from the rain earlier. He was exhausted and he'd spent 2 hours working for free when he desperately needed money. But somehow he felt better than he had in weeks. There was something satisfying about helping someone just because it was the right thing to do. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the shop at 7, just like always.
He had 3 appointments scheduled, which was better than nothing.
The first customer showed up an hour late. The second one complained about the price of an oil change, and the third one didn't show up at all. It was a typical day in the life of a struggling small business owner. Around noon, his phone rang. It was Ted, his landlord. "Ted, I know I'm behind. I'm working on it. I should have at least half the rent by the end of next week," Daniel said quickly, his stomach knotting with stress. "Daniel, wait. That's not why I'm calling," Ted interrupted. "Something strange happened. I got a payment this morning. Someone paid your rent. For the whole year. In full." Daniel felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. "What, that's impossible. Who would do that?" "I have no idea. It was a wire transfer from some company called Harrison Holdings. They said it was paid on behalf of Chen & Son Auto Repair. Do you know anyone at Harrison Holdings?" "I've never even heard of them," Daniel said, completely confused. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of mistake?" "The money's in my account, Daniel." "It's real. Somebody out there must really believe in you," Ted said. And for the first time in months, he sounded happy for Daniel instead of frustrated with him. After hanging up, Daniel just stood there in his shop, trying to make sense of what just happened. $12,000. That's what he'd been behind on rent. Someone had just paid $12,000 for him. But who and why? Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. A local trucking company called asking if he could handle regular maintenance for their fleet of delivery vehicles. That was 6 trucks, steady work, guaranteed income. Daniel had never worked with them before and couldn't understand why they were suddenly interested in his small shop. Then a woman from the local newspaper showed up, wanting to do a feature story on community heroes. She said someone had nominated him and specifically mentioned the story of him helping an elderly man with a broken wheelchair in the rain. Daniel was too confused to refuse the interview. "How did you hear about that?" he asked her. "That just happened a few days ago. Someone sent us a very detailed email about it," she explained. "They said you represented the kind of values that make our community strong, that you help someone expecting nothing in return." Daniel's mind was racing. The only person who knew about that night was William. But William was just an old man in a worn-out wheelchair, wasn't he? That evening, Daniel sat at his computer and did something he probably should have done earlier. He searched online for Harrison Holdings. What he found made his hands start shaking. Harrison Holdings was the investment arm of Harrison Technologies, one of the largest technology companies in the country. And at the top of the corporate structure was a name, William Harrison. Founder and CEO. Daniel clicked on the Images tab and there he was. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile, but in these photos William wasn't wearing worn-out clothes. He was in expensive suits standing on stages, shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers. Articles described him as a billionaire philanthropist who had built his company from nothing and now focused much of his time on charitable work. Daniel stared at his computer screen, his coffee growing cold in his hand. William Harrison. Not just some elderly man who needed help. A billionaire who could buy Daniel's entire block without thinking twice about it. And he'd been sitting in Daniel's shabby office wearing patched clothes, riding in a wheelchair that looked like it came from a thrift store. The more Daniel read, the more incredible it became. William Harrison had started his first company in a garage 40 years ago, much like Daniel's dad had started this shop. He'd built it into a technology empire worth billions, but the articles also talked about his reputation for humility, his massive charitable donations, and his unusual habit of living modestly despite his wealth. One article from a business magazine caught Daniel's attention. The headline read, "The Billionaire Who Tests Character." It described how William Harrison was known for occasionally going out in disguise or presenting himself as an ordinary person to see how people treated him. The article quoted him as saying, "You learn more about someone in 5 minutes when they think you're nobody than in 5 years when they know you're somebody." Daniel's phone buzzed with a text message making him jump. It was from an unknown number. "I hope you don't mind that I helped a bit. You helped me when I needed it. Consider us even." WH Daniel typed back quickly. "Mr. Harrison, this is too much. I just fixed a wheelchair. That was maybe 2 hours of work." The reply came within seconds. "You gave me something much more valuable than time. You reminded me that good people still exist. That's priceless. Don't think of it as payment. Think of it as an investment in someone who deserves a chance to succeed." Daniel didn't know what to say. His hands were shaking as he tried to type a response, but another message came through before he could finish. "Check your email. And don't argue with an old man. We're stubborn." Daniel opened his email and found a message from Harrison Technologies' corporate office. It was an invitation. They were looking for a reliable local shop to handle maintenance for their company vehicles in the region. 15 cars and trucks, regular service contracts with possibilities for expansion. The attached contract showed numbers that made Daniel's head spin. This single account would triple his annual income. But attached to the business email was a personal note from William himself. "Daniel, I've spent decades in business and I've learned to recognize quality when I see it. Not just quality work, but quality character. You didn't help me because you thought you'd get something out of it. You helped me because it was the right thing to do, even when you had your own problems weighing on you. That's rare, too rare. This contract is legitimate business. We need a good mechanic and you are one. But more than that, I believe in investing in people who make the world better, just by being in it. Accept the help and pay it forward when you get the chance. That's all I ask." Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. The newspaper article came out featuring a photo of him in his shop with the headline, "Local Mechanic's Kindness Shows What Community Means." It wasn't a big story, just a feel-good piece in the local section, but people noticed. Customers started coming in who specifically mentioned the article. Some of them became regulars. Mrs. Patterson, who owned the bakery down the street, came in for an oil change and told him she'd been driving past his shop for years but never stopped. "I always went to that big chain place because I thought bigger meant better," she said. "But after reading about what you did, I realized I should be supporting people who care about their community." Daniel wanted to tell her that he wasn't particularly special, that he'd just done what anyone should do, but he was learning that maybe that wasn't true. Maybe doing the right thing when it wasn't convenient was becoming more rare than it should be. The contract with Harrison Technologies started, and suddenly Daniel had steady work. He had to hire an assistant, a young guy named Kevin who reminded him a bit of himself at that age. Eager to learn, willing to work hard, grateful for the opportunity. "You're really good at this," Kevin said one afternoon while they were working on one of the company trucks. Why'd you become a mechanic? My dad taught me, Daniel explained, showing Kevin the proper way to check brake wear. He always said that honest work with your hands was nothing to be ashamed of. That fixing things was just as important as building new things. Maybe more important. Did he own this shop? Kevin asked. Yeah, built it from nothing. It was his dream, Daniel said, feeling the familiar mix of pride and sadness he always felt when talking about his father. That's cool that you kept it going, Kevin said. My dad wanted me to go to college, become an engineer or something. He didn't understand why I wanted to work with my hands. Nothing wrong with either path, Daniel replied. The world needs both. Just make sure whatever you do it right. That's what matters. One evening, about a month after meeting William, Daniel got another unexpected call. This time it was from a lawyer representing something called the Harrison Foundation. Mr. Chen, Mr. Harrison has requested that we reach out to you regarding a potential partnership, the lawyer said in that formal way lawyers talk. A partnership? For what? Daniel asked, confused. Mr. Harrison believes there's a shortage of skilled tradespeople in our region. He'd like to fund a training program, and he thinks your shop would be the perfect place to host it. Apprenticeships for young people who want to learn automotive repair. The foundation would cover all costs, equipment, materials, even stipends for the apprentices. You would provide the training and oversight? Daniel sat down heavily in his office chair. I don't understand. Why me? Mr. Harrison was quite specific about that. He said you understand that success isn't just about making money. It's about building something that lasts and helping others along the way. He believes you'd teach these young people not just how to fix cars, but how to be good at whatever they do. I'd need to think about this, Daniel said, his mind racing. This is a lot to take in. Of course. I'll email you the details. Take your time, the lawyer said. Though I should mention, Mr. Harrison rarely makes offers like this. He has a gift for recognizing character in people. After the call ended, Daniel walked around his shop looking at it with new eyes. His dad had built this place as just a small repair shop, a way to make an honest living and serve the community. But now it could become something more. A place where young people learned skills that would serve them for life. A place that could change lives the way his dad had changed his. That weekend, Daniel drove to his mother's house for their usual Sunday dinner. She looked so much healthier than she had a year ago, with color back in her cheeks and energy in her movements. The cancer treatments had been brutal, but she'd fought through them. The medical bills had nearly destroyed them both financially, but they'd survived that too. You seem different lately, she said while they were eating, lighter somehow. Things have been better at the shop, Daniel said, not quite sure how to explain everything that had happened. Your father would be proud, she said softly. Not just of the business doing well, but of the man you've become. I just try to do what he taught me, Daniel replied. That's exactly what would make him proud, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. He always said that character is built in small moments, in the choices we make when nobody's watching. You proved that the night you helped that man in the rain. You didn't know he was someone important. You just saw someone who needed help. Daniel had told her about meeting William Harrison, though he was still processing it all himself. I keep thinking about that night. What if I had just driven past him like everyone else did? My whole life would be different right now. But you didn't drive past, his mother said firmly. Because that's not who you are. William Harrison didn't change your life, Daniel. He just gave you opportunities that matched who you already were. The rest was always in you. Monday morning, Daniel called the lawyer back and accepted the apprenticeship program. Within weeks, applications started coming in from young people who wanted to learn. Daniel was amazed by how many there were. Kids who couldn't afford college, adults looking to change careers, people who just wanted to work with their hands and build something real. He selected 3 apprentices to start with. A 19-year-old girl named Lisa, who'd always loved cars but never had anyone to teach her. A former Marine named Robert who was struggling to adjust to civilian life. And a high school senior named Tyler who needed a path forward that didn't involve student loan debt. 3 months had passed since that rainy evening when Daniel fixed William's wheelchair, and his life had transformed in ways he still struggled to comprehend. The shop was busier than it had been in years. Between the regular customers, the Harrison Technologies contract, and now the apprenticeship program, Daniel found himself arriving earlier and leaving later each day. But it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from meaningful work. Then one afternoon, an envelope arrived in the mail. Heavy paper, formal lettering, Daniel opened it standing by his workbench, getting a smudge of grease on the corner. "You are cordially invited to the Harrison Foundation Annual Gala," it read. The event was at the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown, one of those fancy places Daniel had only ever seen from the outside. Black tie optional. A handwritten note was attached. "I'd be honored if you could attend. I promise the food is better than my wheelchair was broken." William. Daniel laughed at that, but his stomach knotted with anxiety. A gala? With wealthy people and probably speeches and fancy table settings with too many forks? That wasn't his world. He was a mechanic who spent his days covered in grease and oil. But William had asked. And after everything William had done for him, Daniel felt he owed it to him to show up. He called his mom that evening. "I don't even own a suit," he admitted. "And I have no idea how to act at something like this." "You act like yourself," his mother said firmly. That's exactly who William Harrison wants there. Not some fake version trying to fit in. Just Daniel. The same Daniel who stopped to help a stranger in the rain. So Daniel went to a thrift store and found a decent suit that almost fit. Kevin helped him with his tie the evening of the gala, laughing as Daniel struggled with it for the third time. "You can rebuild an entire engine, but you can't tie a tie?" Kevin teased. "Engines make sense. This is just torture disguised as fashion," Daniel grumbled. The Grand Plaza Hotel was even more intimidating in person. Valets, marble floors, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. He felt completely out of place as he walked in, trying not to gawk at the elegance of it all. The ballroom was filled with people in expensive clothes, holding wine glasses, talking in those confident voices that came from never having to worry about money. Daniel grabbed a glass of water from a passing waiter and tried to blend into the background. "Daniel Chen." A woman in an elegant dress approached him with a warm smile. "I'm Patricia Hammond, director of the Harrison Foundation. Mr. Harrison mentioned you'd be here. He's very much looking forward to seeing you." "Nice to meet you," Daniel said, shaking her hand and hoping his palm wasn't sweaty. "What you're doing with the apprenticeship program is wonderful," Patricia continued. "We've been looking for someone like you for years, someone who understands that education isn't just about classrooms and textbooks. Those young people you're training will have skills for life." Before Daniel could respond, the lights dimmed and someone announced that dinner would be served shortly. Patricia guided him to his table, which was near the front of the room. Daniel found himself sitting between a doctor who ran a free clinic and a teacher who'd started a literacy program. They were kind people, genuinely interested in his work, and Daniel started to relax slightly. Then the speeches began. Patricia took the stage and talked about the foundation's work, the programs they funded, the lives they'd touched. She introduced several award recipients, a nurse who volunteered at homeless shelters, a firefighter who started a youth mentorship program, a librarian who created mobile libraries for rural communities. "And now," Patricia said, her voice taking on a special warmth, "I'd like to introduce someone who needs no introduction. A man who built an empire but never forgot where he came from. A man who measures success not by what he accumulated, but by what he gave away. Please welcome the founder of Harrison Technologies and the Harrison Foundation, William Harrison." The room erupted in applause. Daniel watched as William walked onto the stage, moving with the aid of a cane now instead of the wheelchair. He was wearing an expensive suit, but his smile was the same gentle one Daniel remembered from that rainy night. William waited for the applause to die down, then began to speak. His voice was strong, clear, carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades commanding boardrooms and stages. "Thank you all for being here tonight," William began. "For 40 years I've been fortunate enough to build successful businesses, but I learned something important along the way. Success means nothing if you're the only one who benefits from it. Real success is about lifting others up, about creating opportunities, about recognizing and rewarding character when you see it." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. When they found Daniel, he smiled. "A few months ago I did something I do occasionally. I went out into the world dressed simply, using an old wheelchair to observe how people behave when they think there's nothing to gain from kindness. I've done this many times over the years, and I'm sad to say that most people walk right past. They're too busy, too focused on their own lives, too accustomed to looking the other way." The room was completely silent now, everyone listening intently, but that night, in a grocery store parking lot during a rainstorm, one person stopped, a young man who'd had a difficult day, who had his own serious problems weighing on him. who had every reason to keep driving. But he didn't. He stopped, got soaked helping me, and then spent 2 hours fixing my wheelchair properly in his shop. He refused payment from someone he thought couldn't afford it. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. William's voice grew emotional. In that moment, I saw something rare and precious. I saw character. Not the kind of character that performs for an audience, but the kind that shows up when nobody important is watching. Daniel felt every eye in the room turning toward him. His face grew hot and he wanted to sink through the floor. "Daniel Chen," William said directly to him now. "Would you please stand up?" Daniel's legs felt like jelly, but he stood. The room erupted in applause. He wanted to disappear. Daniel inherited his father's auto repair shop and has been struggling to keep it alive while caring for his sick mother and facing mounting debts. But he never lost sight of what his father taught him. That honest work and treating people right matters more than money. That night in the parking lot, he had no idea who I was. He just saw someone who needed help. William paused, and Daniel could see genuine emotion on his face. This is what real character looks like. This is the kind of person who makes communities strong. Not because they do grand gestures, but because they do the right thing in small moments when it would be easier not to. The applause grew louder. Daniel stood there overwhelmed, not knowing what to do with his hands or where to look. "Daniel, what you did that night reminded me of why I started this foundation. To find people like you and help them succeed, not because of what you might do for us, but because of who you are. The apprenticeship program at your shop is already changing lives. Those young people aren't just learning to fix cars. They're learning from someone who understands that character matters, that quality work matters, that treating people with dignity matters." William raised his glass. "To Daniel Chen, and to everyone else in this room who chooses kindness when it's not convenient, who helps when it's not profitable, who remembers that we're all in this together, you are the ones who give me hope for the future." The room stood in unison, glasses raised. Daniel felt tears burning behind his eyes. This was too much. He wasn't a hero. He'd just helped someone fix a wheelchair. After the speeches ended and dinner was served, Daniel couldn't eat. People kept coming up to him, shaking his hand, telling him how inspiring his story was. He felt like a fraud. All he'd done was be a decent person. That shouldn't be remarkable. Finally, William made his way to Daniel's table. Without the stage and microphone, he was just the kind old man from that rainy night again. William sat down next to Daniel, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Daniel let out a nervous laugh. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that," Daniel said, his voice shaky. "If I had, you wouldn't have come." William replied with a knowing smile. "You would have made some excuse about being too busy or not belonging here." "You're right about that," Daniel admitted. "William, I appreciate everything you've done for me, but that speech made me sound like some kind of saint. I'm not. I just fixed a wheelchair." William leaned back in his chair, his expression growing serious. "Daniel, may I tell you something I've learned in 78 years of life? Of course, the world is full of people who do the right thing when someone's watching. When there's a camera, when there's recognition, when there's something to gain, that's not character. That's performance. Real character is what you do in the moments that don't seem to matter. In the parking lot in the rain. When you're tired and stressed and have every reason to keep driving. Those are the moments that define who we really are." Daniel was quiet, absorbing this. "I started doing these little tests 20 years ago," William continued. "After I became wealthy, I noticed something troubling. People treated me differently. They were kind, helpful, generous, but only because of who I was. I wondered, who would I be to these same people if I was just an old man who needed help? The answer was usually disappointing." "That must be lonely," Daniel said softly. "It is," William agreed. "That's why meeting you meant so much to me. For 2 hours, I wasn't a billionaire or a CEO. I was just William, an old man with a broken wheelchair. And you treated me with dignity and kindness. You can't buy that. You can't fake it. It's either in you or it isn't. It's in you." Before Daniel could respond, Patricia approached with another man. "Mr. Harrison, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce Daniel to Michael Torres. He's been wanting to meet you." Michael shook Daniel's hand enthusiastically. "Daniel, I run a network of community colleges in the region. What you're doing with your apprenticeship program is exactly what we need more of. I'd love to talk to you about potentially partnering. We could help you scale the program, maybe even create a formal certification." Daniel's head was spinning. "I'm just trying to teach a few kids how to fix cars. You're doing much more than that, Michael said. You're offering young people a path to good careers without crushing debt. You're preserving skills that our society desperately needs. This matters. Over the next hour, Daniel met more people than he could remember. A local councilwoman who wanted to discuss small business support programs. A banker who offered to help him with financial planning. A journalist from a major newspaper who wanted to do a feature story about the apprenticeship program. It was overwhelming. Daniel kept thinking about his small shop, about Kevin and the 3 apprentices, about the simple life he'd built. Was he ready for all this attention? Did he even want it? Later, William found Daniel standing alone on the hotel balcony looking out at the city lights. Too much? William asked, joining him. Way too much, Daniel said honestly. I'm a mechanic, William. I fix cars. I teach kids how to change oil and replace brake pads. I'm not equipped for all this other stuff. You're more equipped than you think, William said gently. But I understand if it feels like too much. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you privately. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Daniel. This isn't a gift or charity. It's a business proposal. I want you to read it carefully and think about it. Take as much time as you need. Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a detailed proposal for expanding the apprenticeship program. Harrison Foundation would provide funding to convert the empty lot next to Daniel's shop into a proper training facility. They'd supply equipment, materials, and cover operational costs. Daniel would maintain full control over the program and its curriculum, but there was more. The proposal outlined a vision for creating similar programs in other cities, with Daniel serving as a consultant and trainer for other shop owners who wanted to start their own apprenticeship programs. It would mean traveling, speaking, growing something much bigger than his small shop. This is incredible, Daniel said, his hands trembling slightly as he read. But I'm not a businessman. I wouldn't know how to manage something this big. You'd have support. A full team to handle the business side, William explained. Your job would be the same as it is now, teaching young people, maintaining quality standards, making sure the values that matter don't get lost. You'd be doing what you do best, just on a larger scale. Why me? Daniel asked, the question that had been bothering him since all this started. You could hire professional educators, people with degrees and experience in running programs like this. William turned to face him directly. Because those people would create a program. You would create a legacy. There's a difference. Programs are about systems and metrics. Legacies are about values and impact. Your father built something that lasted not because he was the best mechanic in town, but because he understood what really mattered. You carry that same understanding. That's what I'm investing in. Daniel looked back at the proposal, his mind racing. The lot next to his shop had been empty for years. He'd sometimes daydreamed about what he could do with it if he had the money. Now someone was offering him the chance to turn that dream into reality. What if I mess it up? Daniel asked quietly. Then we'll figure it out and try again, William said simply. Daniel, success isn't about never making mistakes. It's about caring enough to keep trying. You care. That's why this will work. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city below. Finally, Daniel spoke. Can I ask you something? Why do you still test people like you did with me? You've already built your company. You've already made your fortune. Why does it still matter to you? William was quiet for a long moment. When I was your age, I was struggling just like you are now. I had a small business, debts I couldn't pay, and a family depending on me. One day my truck broke down on the highway. I was completely stuck, and I was supposed to be at an important meeting that could save my company. I was panicking. He paused, lost in the memory. An old mechanic stopped. He spent 3 hours fixing my truck on the side of the road. Refused payment. Said he remembered being young and struggling and someone had helped him once. He told me to pay it forward when I got the chance. Did you ever see him again? Daniel asked. No. I went back to that highway looking for him many times, but I never found him. I don't even remember his name. But I remember what he taught me. That kindness matters, that helping others matters, that who we are in small moments matters. Everything I've built, every success I've had, it all traces back to that moment when a stranger chose to help me when he didn't have to. Now Daniel understood. You're paying it forward. I'm trying to, William said. But it's more than that. I'm looking for the people who would stop on that highway. The people who would fix a wheelchair in the rain. Those are the people worth investing in. Those are the people who'll change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. Daniel folded the proposal carefully and put it back in the envelope. I need to talk to my mom and to Kevin and the apprentices. This would affect all of us. Of course, William said. Take all the time you need. Though I should warn you, I'm a stubborn old man. Even if you say no to this specific proposal, I'm not going to stop trying to help you succeed. You're stuck with me now. Daniel laughed, and this time it was genuine, not nervous. I could do worse than being stuck with a stubborn billionaire. 2 weeks later, Daniel called a meeting at the shop. He'd talked to his mom, who cried happy tears and told him his father would be so proud. He'd talked to Kevin, who was excited about the possibility of helping train others. He'd talked to Lisa, Robert, and Tyler, his 3 apprentices, who were amazed that their small shop might become something bigger. But mostly, Daniel had spent those 2 weeks thinking about his father, about the legacy of honest work and treating people right, about whether expanding that legacy was honoring his father's memory or changing it into something else. In the end, he realized it was both, and that was okay. The construction on the new training facility started in the spring. Daniel worked with architects to design a space that felt like a real shop, not a sterile classroom. They installed lifts and equipment, created workstations for hands-on learning, built a small classroom for the technical theory parts. On the day of the grand opening, a crowd gathered. Local news cameras, city officials, representatives from Harrison Foundation, and most importantly, young people who wanted to learn. Daniel stood in front of the building looking at the sign they'd just unveiled. Chen and Son Training Center. Building skills, building character. William stood beside him, leaning on his cane. Your father would be proud, he said quietly.